There is a reason for why I ended up here. I've alluded to it in my past episodes. Today I'm going to be doing a YouTube tag called the Living Abroad tag, and this is the tag that comes from the Dream Days blog, a WordPress blog. We're going to be taking 10 questions and you're going to get to know a little bit more about me as a British person living abroad, my experiences, what I like and don't like, and I'd love to hear what you think as well, so make sure to chuck that in the comments below. So let's get stuck straight in. Question number 1, what country do you live in? Well, thank you for asking. I live in Sweden. Question number 2, how long have I lived here? Well, I've lived out here now for just over 2 years. I moved at the start of 2019, and yeah, so I've been out here since February 2019. It's now March 2021. Even though I guess the last year kind of doesn't really count because, let's be honest, none of us have been or moved anywhere. So maybe I've lived here 1 year, maybe I've lived here 2 years. I'll let you be the decider. Question number 3, have you ever lived in another country apart from your own and the one you're living in now? Depends where you draw the borders really, because I've never officially been a resident in another country apart from here in Sweden, but I did spend a summer living out in Cyprus, in the northern half of Cyprus, the Turkish side, for a conservation project a couple of years ago. And I'm not going to go too far into that now because I'm sure we can do a whole other episode with a story time where we talk about my experiences living in Cyprus. If you're interested in that, let me know down below. But basically it was a turtle conservation project. I was one of a number of volunteers who helped to look after the baby turtles as they were being born and make sure they got out into the sea and survived properly. I lived out there for about 3 months, so that's the closest I got to living abroad, but as I say, there was always an end period. I wasn't a resident, so maybe that doesn't really count, so I would say this is the first time I've properly lived abroad. Did you expect to end up living where you do? No, not really. When I was younger, I always used to say to my friends and family that I could see myself moving to Spain. I have loved Barcelona for years and years. I've been there probably 4 or 5 times now, and every time I love it even more, so I really thought that would be where I spent my days. There is a reason for why I ended up here. I've alluded to it in my past episodes, but that story will come for a different time. But yeah, so I didn't expect to end up living in Sweden, so no, I didn't think I'd be living here, but I'm glad I am. I really like living in Sweden. It's a fun place to be. Why you decided to move abroad? Well, that's interesting because I just said I wasn't going to tell this story yet, so let me give you the simple version. As I say, I'd always told my friends and family that I wanted to live abroad when I was older. As I say, didn't think it was going to be Sweden, but the reason that I ended up out here was because my girlfriend is Swedish, so we met in London, and then I ended up moving back out here when she was moving out here to spend more time closer together, so we didn't have to be long distance for too long. And then the next question is, was it hard to get a residency permit here? Define hard, I would say. It wasn't easy, that's for sure. There's lots of requirements that you have to meet. It was a little bit easier for me because at the time the UK was part of the EU, which was one of the reasons why I moved at the point I did rather than leaving it a little bit longer, because then I didn't have to apply as a third-party national. Yeah, it wasn't that straightforward, and I get the impression that this is not me bashing Sweden in any way. I think it's hard whichever country you want to move to because there's all these requirements you have to meet. The hardest part was actually in Sweden. They have this thing called a personal number, which is kind of associated with you, and it kind of makes sure that you're able to move through society and get access to certain services and benefits and things. But to be able to have one, you have to live in Sweden. But obviously to live in Sweden, you clearly need somewhere to live. But to be able to get somewhere to live, you need to have this personal number. So it's kind of this whole catch-22 where, you know, I had to move here, live in an Airbnb for a bit just to be able to say that I had an address so that I could get a personal number. But I couldn't live in a permanent address because I didn't have a personal number. So it wasn't easy, but once I'd met those requirements, it was just to go to the tax agency here, and then after that it was fairly plain sailing for me because of being an EU member, so I was quite lucky in that respect. How is it to live there, where you do now, as a foreigner? Well, Sweden is a really cool place to be, and I think it's one of those places that is seen as a bit mystical. Maybe you don't know a lot about it unless you've been or you have some sort of association to it. But as a foreigner, one of the stereotypes is that it can be quite overwhelming because when you arrive, Swedes are known stereotypically, and I'm not saying this is everybody, but this is the stereotype, as being, you know, quite insular, quite introverted, and maybe it's quite hard to get through those barriers. And I would say some of that's true, but not, you know, all of it. I mean, the people out here are really nice. My experience has been, once you get to know Swedes, they're really welcoming and really nice people. But I understand why people think maybe it's a little bit hard to come in as a foreigner, and that was definitely something that I would say that you notice when you first arrive. But I think, maybe that wouldn't be unique to being here either. I think wherever you live, when you move to a new country, unless you're going to be living in the capital city, it can be quite difficult to meet people. There are ways around it. You just have to make the effort. Is my conclusion. Do you have any tips for someone moving to that country? Well, funny you should ask. Yeah, I would say make sure that once you're here, you try and find as many opportunities as possible to meet new people. And I mean, both Swedes, but also internationals too. So one of the things that I used was a website called meetup.com, where they do a lot of different, people can organise community meetups to meet up with their friends. That felt like quite a good way for me to meet other people that were in a similar position to me. I went to language cafes because I was learning the language. One thing that Sweden is known for is that Swedes are super good at English. So as me coming from an English speaking country, the language itself wasn't necessarily a barrier. People will speak to me and understand me. But, it's always good to be able to show that you're learning the language and that you're interested in the language, because that can be an instant way to kind of create that sense of belonging and community and getting to know people. It's an ultimate icebreaker. So I started learning the language. That helped me to meet other people that were also trying to do the same. I went to these random meetups that I found on Facebook. Of course, I'd encourage you to do that as safely as possible. Do it through organised groups rather than trying to do it yourself. But it was a great way to meet new people. And I think it was a good way for me, in the first instance, to meet people that would then become friends. And today I feel like I have quite a nice network here established in Sweden. But as I say, it's all about the effort that you put in is the effort you get back, I think. So if you don't go out and put yourself out there, then maybe the results aren't going to be so good. And it is uncomfortable at times, but I think that would be the case wherever you go. That's my tips for someone moving to Sweden. Now the next question is an interesting one. Describe in one word your experience in this country. I obviously can't give any more detail, I can only give you the one word. So the one word that I would use to describe my experience here in Sweden would be nature. And then the final question in the tag today is name one country you've never lived in before that you think you would quite like to move to at some point. And I'm taking this to mean, not literally, so I'm not thinking about logistics and where it would be possible for me to move or where I'm likely to move. It's just a country that I'd like to live in if I had the opportunity, if I could just click my finger and go there right now. And right now I'm feeling like, not just because of the pandemic, but also because of lifestyle and things that I value, I think New Zealand would be a cool place to be. But as I say, especially because of the pandemic now, it feels like it's one of the few places in the world where life is fairly normal, and I'm very jealous. But also, I know people that are living out there. You see clips of it online. The landscapes look beautiful. The nature looks amazing. And it just looks like a really cool place to live, where you're kind of so different from where we are here in Europe, but at the same time, some creature comforts that are familiar. So what about you? Where would you like to live that you've not lived before? Where's your dream location to move to? What you've just witnessed is a highlight clip from my Just a Brit Abroad podcast from the episode that was released last week. If you want to see the episode in its entirety, you can do that right here on my YouTube channel. I've put the link right on the screen for you now, so you can go and find that. But I'd highly recommend that you subscribe and that you also turn the bell on so that you are notified as soon as a new episode comes out, because they're released regularly right here and you're not going to want to miss out on the fun and games. It's all things lifestyle, culture, travel and tourism. So make sure you're tuned in here, ready for a new episode very, very soon. But in the meantime, thank you for being here. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye guys.